All right, good morning. This is a recap of last night's session. Well, I was in my hat straight there. There we go. Get my hat straight so it doesn't bother anybody, right? Okay. Um, Session 43, Blackfish Bay, the Chronicles of Joth, but really these are, as Todd said before sessions, it's like the fourth series of Chronicles in this whole 4 years or so. So really it's the Blackfish Bay Chronicles of this overarching Joth. Again, Joth is just the city. Right. Unbelievable. So, and I don't know how long we've been playing in Blackfish Bay. It feels like we've been here, I would say since COVID. It seems like since around the COVID years, we've been in Blackfish Bay. So pretty cool. But I could be mistaken about that. Um, okay. So I've had some advice from somebody who has been watching the Dragon Slayer APs, and his advice was, hey, lay out some of the stuff before I get into the recap or I get into the reflections. That's fair. It's a fair observation. It might help people. I think it would help people who are following along Barrel Maze. Joth is Todd's campaign world, his hex world. So it isn't published. It's not like you can follow along or you can kind of make sense of, right. It's Todd's thing and it's not published out there for people to follow along. But I'll attempt to do something similar just to see. There's nothing wrong with trying to make recaps. You have better information. So first, we're playing old school essentials with a smattering of the advanced rules. Most of those advanced rules are coming through character classes. Like we have a bard in this group, and we have an illusionist in this group. They're not in the OSE basic book, so we're playing old school essentials. We're trying to play it as close to the rules as written as we can. Obviously, with the realities that we have to have rules over rulings because not everything's covered. Right, that's the fact of old D20 OSR games. We have to have rules over rulings. Todd is also implementing, of course, his own hex crawl and some of his own world stuff, right? So those are things I'm not privy to. I can't speak to those rules, right? They're not published. I can't speak to them. We have myself playing a human third level thief, Martin. We have Dell playing a second level illusionist. I'm assuming human for the first time in sessions. So the first time we've met Zarius, delusional or something like that. Some kind of version of delusional is his last name. And then we have, of course, the long-term returner, one of the conquerors of Stony Lonesome Tower, George, the liar, the bard. I believe he's a third level bard, and that is John's character. Again, human. And that's it for players. Unfortunately, Dave's got scheduling conflicts of late, and Justin unfortunately couldn't make it. We really miss both those guys, but they'll be back, right? I mean, these are drop in, drop out. Um, this is just in a modern world where people have lives and families and careers. We have to make allowances that people are going to come and go, right? Okay, so let's see what else. This starts. The last session ended with us having to actually beach in the Lake of Talons in a blizzard. We were crossing the Lake of Talons when our boat, Captain Stalworth's little boat, which is owned and operated by Trotter, one of Dell's former characters, the capitalist halfling of Blackfish Bay. The boat was attacked, and we ended up attempting to fight it off as I commanded Stalworth to beach, get as close to shore as possible. In a blizzard in a lake, I didn't want to be floundering in the water with this creature. And fortunately, he was able to beach his boat in shallow water that we could get out and get away to safety. And his boat was damaged, but he was able to get it loose and head back to Blackfish Bay. So we started at the end of that session, we beached, we ran ashore his little boat so we could bail out. Okay. We open up, same situation. The blizzard is calmed. We can see better now, but everything's covered. So the encroaching wax, which is part of the world, this wax encroaches upon everything. And the dragon, the god Thraxus, if the tithing is paid, it will destroy the wax and keep the wax at bay of most civilization. But if we don't pay our tithing, if we aren't committed to Thraxus, the dragon god, this wax devours everything. And this wax it hardens. It's an acid that covers the land and it hardens. So if you breach this crust or fall into it or step into it, then you will be devoured by this wax. So it's a civilization destroying problem. it is a world destroying problem, right? Okay. So we could see the wax visually before the blizzard. And then, of course, we've lost track of exactly where the wax stops. So we're literally wading in freezing water along the shore. George has negotiated with Stallworth to get an oar that we could use to poke looking for the wax. And he successfully bartered that by saying, listen, I'll pay for the repairs of your ship, loan us the oar. And, just loan it to us. We don't need it for. And so George successfully barters that transaction. Uh, and we set out along the shore looking where the wax begins and ends, and we do find a space, and we crawl up out of the cold. My character luckily made his constitution check and did not suffer a constitution modifier. Unfortunately, Zurius freezing and George's feet freezing from the cold water, they both see their constitution temporarily reduced by 1 point. Again, this is not in the rules. This is a great overland hex crawl world effect, right? Weather affects things, cold affects things. I love this. So it's not like in old school essentials that I'm aware of, right? So this is another one of those things that we do to make these things more than just talk, right? The weather matters, the cold matters. Wading in the shore is going to affect this. It's like a saving throw. It's just he just made it a constitution check. So it was basically a constitution save. It's just in old school, you roll under the number as opposed to over for a save. Okay. So it worked beautifully. My character was lucky enough to brave it fairly well, and they struggled a little bit. So they were affected temporarily until they could get to warm weather. Okay. We climb out, we hear the wailing. We'd heard in the last session the wailing, and we had witnessed this wailing kind of ghost-like figure as it wandered in the wilderness screaming for Hootie. And Hootie is a magical blowfish that's been involved in these campaigns from day one. And the thing we see, we're not really aware of it, as these characters don't know who that is. We as players know who this ghostly image is, but our characters don't know. So we don't meta that, of course. And we decide, so our goal in the last session was Jacotus, our patron, asked us to rescue Hilga from the Longfangs. She's been apprehended as a bandit from the Longfangs. And so we're on a mission as a thief to go release her, either steal her away from their prison cells or barter her release or some other opportunity. And as we trek toward the road, we want to get to the nearest road so we can then get to the Longfang camp in a reasonable amount of time. We don't want to detour all the way back to Blackfish Bay, despite the conditions of Zurius and George freezing. We're trudging on, and we discuss along that journey. As I talk to George, do you think we should break her out, or do you want to attempt to buy her freedom? Pay her bail, or pay her bond, or pay her warrant, whatever, or negotiate her. And he said, "Listen, I think we start with just trying to pay her fine, right? And which is good because we don't want to make enemies of the Longfangs, right? These guys are pretty remarkable monster hunters. So yeah, we're not interested in becoming enemies of the Longfangs, right? So we get into camp midday, not midday, but yeah, probably midday, and we meet. I think he did say midday, noon. We get into camp, I think at noon, and we're greeted by one of the Longfangs, and they're described as being fierce, basically warriors and stout men, and they all wear some trophy around their neck, whether it's a claw or a tooth, right? A long fang. And he greets us as Orin, and he welcomes us. He says the Longfang camp is always open to passers, and the hospitality of the Longfangs is always available. And we tell him that we're here because we've heard one of our somebody that we need to get has been taken prisoner. And Orin says, "Well, I can't help you with that. I have no authority on that, but I can take you to our alpha." And alpha is what they title the leader of the Longfangs. He's the alpha. This man's a beta. And over to the longhouse is where we'll find him. So we go to the longhouse. The longhouse is where everybody sleeps, where everybody feasts. There are some people here and there, and he sits up atop not a throne, but he sits atop the prominent position in the room. Oren introduces us, and he jumps up, and before we can kind of begin our parlay, he says, "No, I want you to sit, warm yourselves, eat, drink. You are always welcome." So there is no way, Martin. I'm just a thief. I'm not an enemy. I'm not an assassin. There is no way I want to make enemies of these people. I mean, they're clearly They're clearly, although I'm a neutral aligned thief, anyone who's willing to bring in strangers and allow us to eat and allow us to rest and stay safely. I don't want to make enemies of these people. I don't want to steal her away. I'd like to legally get her away. So being a thief doesn't mean I'm a criminal, right? Okay. So if I was chaotic, well, it might be a different deal, right? So Zurius, of course, and George have to warn, right? They have to fix this constitution effect that Todd is so aptly provided through the weather effects, which I love, absolutely love. And then we eat, we drink, and we meet him, we talk to him, and George is able to talk to him and tell him, listen, we have a patron, a noble person who you have apprehended somebody that he wants released. And he says, well, listen, we're only in charge of apprehending them and storing them in the cells. We are not capable of bartering or making their legal um, negotiations. You'll have to do that with the Justicar, who's currently not here. Um, and the Justicar. And so we asked some questions. Well, what is normal punishment for banditry? Well, she's been caught. Usually she'll have to go into the trial pits. If she lives, she's freed. If she dies, it's entertainment. So these are like arenas where criminals are asked to either basically fight in the trials to earn their freedom, and that's entertainment, but it also earns tithing to pay Thraxus, the dragon god. So this economy literally are excuses to function to pay the dragon god, right? To abate, to keep away the wax. Again, Todd's world is fantastic, right? We don't write stories. I mean, GMs hopefully have stuff, but the story is what you learn as you play, and the world is what you learn as you play, and it unveils itself naturally through your characters playing in the universe. And Todd is a master at giving us these glimpses into the world around us and what we might know here and what we see in the distance. And he's just a master at folding in the cultures of his world. It's brilliant. It's a masterpiece. And so we learn all this and we decide, okay, Zorius wants to stay, feast, drink, and basically ingratiate himself to the Alpha, right? The Alpha's name is Borland. And they do. They make merry while George and I, Oren takes us over so we can verify that the person in custody is indeed Hilda. And remember, George has a crush on Hilda. So George is also doubly motivated here, right? His character met Hilda earlier in a couple of I don't know how many sessions ago, session 30, 37, 38, and he was smitten by Hilda. And Hilda's this big, buxom, with large eyes and red hair, and he instantly is smitten by Hilda. So when he heard of her troubles, George is doubly motivated, right? So we got to do this for Jacotus, but at the same time, George, definitely is personally invested. And Martin is aware of that. And Martin is, I wasn't aware of it until I met him on the boat, but I am more than willing to say, hey, every man has his love, right? Mine happens to be wealth, right? My character wants to get rich and gold and treasure. And, some minutes it's other people, right? So Martin is more than willing to help George achieve such a thing because it also benefits us to achieve this thing. So we decide to go over, and Oren takes us around, we see the cells. I take a moment to investigate the quality of the cells and the quality of the lock. And this is another thing I love about Todd. So I'd say to Todd, I don't want to pick the lock, obviously, here. It's broad daylight. Oren's here. We're just here to verify that she's the one we want to get. But at the same time, we're talking to him and taking in all the information around the arena and all these cells, what are in these cells. My character wants to assess the quality of that lock. So I asked Todd, can I make a open locks check visibly to determine the quality of this lock? Not to actually attempt it, but I want to know whether I'm up against a lock that I can even deal with, basically. And I was cueing that in a way, it's an open locks check that I'll do later, right? If that makes sense. So what I mean is I already know before I come back, I can open this lock. He makes the roll. I don't know the roll. And he says, it's a simple lock. It's cake. You got it. So I would see that when we come back. If we had to come back at midnight or 1 a.m, whatever, to free her, I wouldn't have to make a lockpick check. Now, I don't know that. I mean, Todd may still ask me to make one with a bonus or something, right? But I was basically exercising my lockpicking skill with my knowledge and my eyes. That I would then it would just be a matter of doing it. And Todd handled this beautifully. And this is where we use the rules properly. Rules is written, but I want to know now, right? And I'll come back if we need to later. And he describes it's simple. This is cake. This is no such. This is there's nothing to this law. So that cues me that yeah, I've got it locked. I've got it picked if I so want to. Okay. So we meet her. We talk to her through a sliding thing, and she comes to, and we talk to her, and we leave George, and we find out, and there were things I needed to know here, So I kind of pushed George to the side and said, "Listen, we're trying to negotiate but we need Gregor. We need the Kraken. We need your ex-partner and the evil Kraken because he may be the best negotiating trip to get you out." That's what she tells us. Oh, he's held up in the East Woods. He's nuts. I'm not dealing with him anymore. He's lost his mind. He's murdered a band, an actual musical band. Um, he attempted to murder the Well Witch to stop the well from being open, the portal well from being opened. And so she lays out all this information for us. All of these were positive reaction checks or neutral reaction checks. So again, Todd doesn't just give it to us. These are charisma checks. So we're using the reaction table with charisma checks and negotiation chips, our ability to negotiate. And it is just perfect. Listen, this is why people have been playing this version of Dungeons and Dragons for 50 years because it works and it works flawlessly and the role play is never interrupted, but in my opinion. And so we have all these tools to do this stuff, and the challenge does not leave the game. So we get all this information. She tells us in the East Woods, be careful though. Stay to the trails because there's a giant in the East Woods. And so my character says, you mean a giant of a man or an actual giant? She said, no, an actual giant. So now Martin is thinking, uh-oh, we're going to have to weigh our options here. So George says his goodbyes to Hilda, and I take George aside and I tell Oren we want to walk around your camp and just look at everything. And Oren leaves us. And as we walk, I say to George, listen, we have a couple of choices. I got that locked. That's nothing, man. We can come back in the middle of the night. I can free her and we can get out of here. Or do you want to attempt to go get Gregor and bring him back as a swap for Hilda? And George goes, basically, I think he feels the same way about the Longfangs I do. One, we can't, if we mess it up, we can't defeat the Longfangs. Two, the Longfangs aren't our enemy, and they are the authority in the area. And three, Gregor would be the perfect chip to bargain Gregor for the girl. And so we're in a total agreement, but I wanted to give George options. I see this as me helping George break his crush out of jail. So I'm not going to mess this up for George, right? There's nothing in this for me but achieving the goal so we can get paid. I don't care how we achieve the goal. I want to give him an option. So George says, "No, let's go look for Gregor. As dangerous as that may be, I think that's less dangerous than making enemies in the Longfangs." Okay, but then he said, "But by the way, just in case, we can always open those other cells to create a distraction when you get her." So, he's saying, but we may have to break her out. So George keeps that option open. Then we head back to the longhouse, but along the way, I leave George and I head over to some working retainers. And Oren pointed out that there were men all over the camp working that were not wearing iconography. They were not garbed up, scarred up, and they were younger apprentices, retainers, wannabe Longfang, right? And they were doing menial tasks like skinning things, cooking, firewood, whatever. They're doing menial stuff for the Longfangs leaders, so to speak. And so I go over to a group of four and I say, listen, I know you men are apprentices. You men want to be Longfangs. I've got a opportunity for you. Are any of you willing to join myself and my two friends as we head into the East Woods to apprehend the most vile criminal in the region? And if you do that, gentlemen, and we bring him back successfully, imagine what that's going to do for your stature here among your alpha and your beta. You're going to be, it's going to benefit you greatly. And again, Todd doesn't just say, yeah, great. Todd modifies it and makes a roll for every one, all four. So two of them say no, 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 and they walk away. And two of them say absolutely. So a dwarf walks away, and so we end up getting what he's referring to as meat shields, but they're retainers. We've got a first level magic user's joined us as a retainer, and a first level thief has joined us as a retainer. The thief has a dagger, but I give him my bow and I give him some of my arrows and outfit him. And I tell them at midnight, meet us outside the longhouse. We are going to leave at midnight and get out into the wilderness, headed that way. Why do you ask? Because I didn't want to in the morning us to have to explain to any betas that give them orders that these men are going with us, right? So I'm basically absconding with two of their laborers, and under the influence that this might actually help earn them a rank. If they could bring back a trophy, or they could bring back a prisoner along with us, they will prove their value. And so, of course, some of them eat it up, but I didn't want to have to get anybody else's approval. So I said at midnight, we're all going to just escape away and go do this. I didn't want anyone to say, no, you can't. These men are tied to us, or I didn't want anybody to influence. So they said, great, we'll meet you. So we go in, and of course, Xerius has been putting on a show with his illusion for everybody. He's been drinking heavily, and he has been learning from Borland due to his illusions and keeping Borland entertained. He's got quite a bit of information about magical curiosities and places in the world where we can go look for magical stuff. And Xerius is a shopkeeper from the big city of Joth who goes out looking for curiosities, or what are they called? Curios to sell. So he's got his own wants, right? I mean, he has his own motives, and it doesn't have to contradict what we're trying to achieve, but he's getting information and rumors, right? And Todd has also said, by the way, remind me later that you will have learned a couple of rumors in all of this. So Dell has yet to learn. There's a couple of rumors Dell's character will learn through all this interaction. Well, meanwhile, he's inebriated. So my character comes in with George. George is resting and drinking, and he's watching this. And Xerius is inebriated. And we're like, listen, you need to be ready because we're leaving here in a few hours. And he's like, well, I got to sleep, and I can't memorize my spells. And he's drunk. And we're like, well, it doesn't matter. We're leaving here at midnight. We got to get out of here. We have a plan. So Xerius kind of half understanding and half not. At come midnight, when everybody's calmed down, everybody's passed out, basically inebriated or are eating, drinking, mingling, whatever. We help Xerius outside, and we meet the other two retainers, and we head toward the East Woods. And again, about an hour trek away from camp, we set camp, and we want to get as much rest from 1 o'clock in the morning to whatever, to allow Xerius to sleep it off and to allow Xerius to memorize his spells for the day. And we go on watch. Well, some point in the night, our thief is in a conflict, and it wakes us up as we stand and draw our weapons. George and I draw our weapons to see what's going on. The magic user stands and wakes, but he stands away, doesn't get involved. Xerius lies snoring, so I give him a kick, trying to get him up. And Xerius is kind of half dreaming and half drunk and doesn't quite even know that he's not at the longhouse. You can imagine Xerius really has no clue what's going on. We engage this melee between our watchman, thief, meat shield, Maricor, and a bear. So he's literally on the ground with his bear, and he's fighting for his life. And we end up, all of us, engaged in a melee, and we damage it. It manages just to maul. You can imagine it was almost playing with Maricor. It wasn't. It actually didn't physically damage him. Thank God. It would have probably killed him with one blow, but it missed every one of its major attempts. We managed to fight it off, wounded enough that it fails a morale check and it starts to leave. I make another blow at it at the end, almost killing it. Xerius, at this point, drunk at one point, flung the stone at it and collapses in the snow, but strikes home without hitting any of us with the stone. So it's just this amazing, imaginative space, role play, but we followed all the rules. It's brilliant. Anyway, I get a final sword strike on it as it lumbers away and wound it pretty gravely. And I ordered the boy, I help the boy onto his feet, and I say, it's your kill. Imagine that, taking that back as your trophy. And I say that, I can say that with confidence because we met the Longfangs and we went into the Longhouse, and Todd described all of their trophies on the walls, all of their bear heads and their monster heads and all of their racks of deer. So you can imagine their Longhouse was just, the walls were covered in the heads and the trophies of animals and monsters and creatures. And I said to the man, I promised you would be able to go back with the trophy. Here's your chance to get the bear. So he draws back with my short sword and he misses. And I pat him on the back and I say, well, maybe next time. And that's where we fade to black. Now, there's one event that occurred on our trek from the lake to Long Camps where we met the Seekers. And this was on the road. So as we're crossing kind of onto the road, we're navigating up to the Longfangs on the road, and they're coming down from the Bricket Bottoms mine area. And we see these guys in the distance, and we approach, and they have a prisoner in chains. And there's, I don't know how many others, 6 of them, I think, and they're garbed up, and they have shields, and they are Seekers of the White Door. and they protect the so they're zealots that hunt the undead or the raised dead, and they have a prisoner. We meet with him on the road, and this is before we get to the long fangs, okay? And we meet on the road, and he talks to us, and I say, "Listen, for a few gold, would you like to know some information about a potential undead?" And they're like, "Well, what's the story here?" And he goes, "Well, first, I must make sure you folks are not raised or undead." And we're like, "Okay." So he pulls out this thing and he shines this magical amulet on us, and we're all normal and we're all alive. We have not been raised. And he puts it on and says, "Yes, you are good people." And the guy with him bursts out, terrified, screaming, "This is a mistake. This is a mistake. I'm not undead. Don't let him take me." La 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 la. And he's rants and rants and rants. And then my character says, "Well, listen, prove to us that he's undead because this poor man is begging for his life." So he takes out the amulet and he shines it on him, and we see the amulet exposes what he really is, which is this kind of undead monster in a form. He had been a person that had died and been raised. He wasn't undead like a zombie. So he'd been actually raised by someone with the powers to bring someone back to life, is what Todd's getting at. And we're like, "Oh, okay." And then I asked Sirius, "Wow, what is this real or is this an illusion?" And Sirius said, "No, if it was an illusion, it would be one of the most powerful I've seen." So I'm pretty confident that this is not a trick. And then I say to him, "Well, then you should definitely be interested in our news of this undead creature that you would want to apprehend, would you not?" And he says, "Tell me first." So we tell him, and I tell him of the man that we heard moaning and crying for Hootie walking along the shore. And he listens and he takes it in. He makes a couple of reaction checks. Again, Todd doesn't have to decide yes or no. He doesn't have to take fiat here. He makes a reaction check, modifies it by what we say, modifies it by our charisma scores, whether we sweeten the pot, etc. And he accepts it. And he says, "This is good information. You're good men." And he orders one of the women seekers to pay us. And we got 10 gold. I gave 3 to Zirius and I gave 3 to George. I kept the fourth for being for being the one to solicit this gold. So I kept the extra gold piece. And that ended up being a great parlay. So we've now met the Seekers of the White Door. We've had a positive encounter with those guys. We have actually parlayed with them. We've given them information. We've earned some keep. And again, when we're meeting people, we're making positive interactions with these people, right? And then we headed on to the Long Fangs, and the rest is the rest of the story. So the session closes with the boy taking a final shot to get his trophy bear, and he's cold and he's scared and he's just been mauled by a bear, and unfortunately, the arrow goes afoul, and it lumbers off into the darkness of the morning without him getting his kill. I can imagine if we wanted to, we could hunt it. I'm sure is leaving a blood trail in the snow in the morning, but that would be something we would have to discuss. Might be of value to our retainers as payment because we haven't made a deal with them payment wise. I've only promised them that if they help us, this is going to go well with their leaders as initiates to the long things. Unbelievable. The more I play, I don't mean this as a GM because I have been GMing these games or a version of these games, Sword and Wizardry, White Box, fantastic middle adventure game. Years of basic fantasy. I mean, again, of all the games I've played more basic fantasy in the last 14 years than anything. But always D20, old school OSRs. 90% of my GMing was that as a kid, and it was that even coming back as an adult. And I have been blessed. I've been blessed to enjoy these games and to run them for people all over the world and locally. But I've been blessed of late to be able to really embrace Joth for now 40 years as a player, and of course Dragon Slayer of late with Eloy and the guys. And the more I get it, the more I play it, the more I embrace it, the more it confirms that it is why I enjoyed this hobby as a kid. It's why I continued to play as a kid, but I wasn't able to be a player so much as a kid as I was always a DM. And of late, they have been some of the greatest experiences I've had. The Joth sessions this last year have just been phenomenal, and they've been again. Um, they are for me. They're the quintessential experience. If you can find a GM or a group of players to do this type of thing, then I think there will always be an understanding as to why the OSR, the OGL had to exist and why it's still going, you know, why it led to 2, and then it led to 2.5, and then 3, and 3.5, and 4, and Pathfinder 2, and D&D 5th edition, and the umpteen hundreds of OSRs that are based on this. It works, and it is, I think, fundamentally, it is still the most rewarding way to game because we have challenge, we have some simulation, we have role playing, we have life and death, we have meaning, there's risk reward, there's critical thinking, there's problem solving, there's resource management. Um, and none of it is too much of one thing. It ain't like it's all resource management, nothing else. It's not all narrative and nothing else. It's not all dice rolling and nothing else. It is, I think, the best of both worlds. Now, can you get this with RuneQuest? Of course. RuneQuest is just it's just different dice, different mechanisms and skills. But of course you can get this with RuneQuest, right? I mean, that's just a different set of dice and a different set of rules to navigate the same dilemmas and the same problems. It's a different world, right? So, you know, but yes, you can get this with RuneQuest. So it's not just the D20. But for me, the D20 is, as I've said before, it is so mastered by now. If you are 50 plus years old and you've been playing any version of old D20 OSR or old versions of D&D, and you've been doing them as long as we have, you've mastered it. And it's just flawless. And it's so simple. When I said to Todd, I'm going to assess this lock and technically pick it with my eyes before I actually physically pick it, Todd knew instinctually. He just knew immediately that I was already picking the lock. I didn't have to physically pick the lock here and in danger of getting caught, etc. But then I knew, I would have known if he would have said, oh, dude, this looks like it's way above your head. I would have said to George, I can't handle that lock. Right. But because he said, no, it's cake. It's easy. You got it. I can say to George, no sweat. Right. So we can plan our night. Are we going to come back and try to save her from jail? Or is that an option? Right. And that's how characters assess. When I look at a problem as a human being, I don't automatically do it. I look at something and say, yeah, I think I can fix. Oh, yeah, let me look at that. A mechanic pops your hood and he fiddles around and says, oh, yeah, I see what the problem is here. Yeah, I can fix this. He fixes it first with his head and his eyes, his knowledge, before he actually gets his tools out and his replacement parts. So I should be able to assess that. And Todd, it's just, listen, I think I'm talking to people that come from the same planet I come from here. Most of our subscribers, I think, are D20 OSR guys. You already know what I'm talking about. And the reality is it's such a fluid and wonderful experience, whether you're dungeon crawling or whether you're doing hex crawls or sandboxing or whatever you're doing, right? Even if you got a little more narrative and less simulation, whatever. It's for me, it's just the perfect way to do this thing. And I'm happy of late, man. I am on cloud nine. I am blessed. The Dragon Slayer games, along with what we're doing in Joth, is just, for me, it's just at 54 years old, you know, being in a way semi-retired as a GM, I've talked about it before. When I GM, I would GM this, if you know, I would GM an old D20 OSR game, and I would do what I've always done, but to provide a great space for human beings to enjoy the game. But mostly it's going to be probably GMing my games. It'll be DMing Dark Age of Man and Space Age of Man and whatever else Dell and I complete, mostly for play testing and to teach. But I am, in a way, I'm semi-retired as a GM. I've really enjoyed GMing Simba Room, and Simba Room was a nice sweet spot for me, and I've enjoyed the heck out of that. But the reality is, I am absolutely thrilled to just be a player in old D20 OSRs. It's amazing. And to be honest, I've been doing it so long, and I'm so comfortable with it, and I understand it so well. It's intuitive, it's comfortable, that all of these adjudications that I see Eloy make and that I see Todd make, and you know somewhere deep in your soul, yeah, we're all in our 50s or 60s, and there's a language, there's this unspoken language of exactly, we all get, we know exactly why Eloy makes that decision or what Eloy's doing or why Todd, you know, there's a moment there when I say I want to pick this lock, but I'm doing it with my eyes. I'm doing it with my knowledge, my assessment. And Todd makes the roll. He still makes the pick lock roll, but hidden from me. It's just, it's going to be, yes, you did or no, you didn't, but you're going to know it intellectually as versus dropping to my knees and trying to pick a lock in the broad daylight, right? And there is a magic in that because that's more, it's what characters would do. And as I tell George, hey, if we have to, I can pick that lock. It allows George and I to say, well, what is our options now? We kind of know that. So do we want to do that? Do we want to plan for that? Do we want to, and George says, no, I don't want to, that's our last resort. It's like, yeah, but at least now we know we could try it. We can do it. And there would still be the fallout of trying to get away with a prisoner. There'd still be a fallout if he did want to open up other cells and release these creatures. Well, then we could be potentially mauled by the creatures while we're trying to free a girl. So there would have been a lot of chaos that could have ensued if that was the way he wanted to go about getting the girl out. I, being the professional thief, would have advised, just let me, you guys go hide in the woods out there outside of camp, and I'll go get her and bring her to you, and we'll run away, right? I would have advised, let's make this as let me creep in under darkness and get her free, and we'll get away. Before I wanted to open up any more, unleash any creatures that would ultimately maul us, right? So can't get enough of this, man. I want to thank Todd again just for consistency, and Todd offering this for us for years and years and years. Every other week is beautiful because it doesn't burn out Todd. It allows Todd to get rest. It allows Todd to enjoy it as a player. It allows Todd to prepare, and it allows all of us, the same, to make more often because we're not trying to make it weekly. And then Eloy's game is just a beautiful, Dragon Slayer is different enough that it's worth it. And the Barrel Maze is a great experience. And again, Eloy, as I wrote to the guys in the Discord, all the guys, Eloy, how he's been GMing Dragon Slayer is flawless. It's master work. It's a veteran at work, and it just allows us to be players. It allows us to do the thing. The communication's there, how he's utilizing the rules, and it's just it works beautifully. Anyway, everybody out there, again, man, uh do what you love what you do, and make no excuses because you don't want to play the modern D&D. You don't have to make excuses for that. Find your OSR, man. Get your old D&D mold veil. Get your old AD&D hardback books out. Um, you know, there's nothing to say those don't work as well today as they ever did. And it's the people you play with first. It's the group you have. It's the players you have. It's your GM. That is all the most important, right? And that they can't sell in a book. They can't sell it to you at a store. You're going to have to find those folks. And most of us, I think, have those folks. And so enjoy. All right. Bye.